Should you be trading pawns in the opening? Is there any reason to that? Especially should you be giving up on material now to trading off those pawns? Well, there are some definite scenarios where you actually must take off the pawns and sacrificing some of your material, that being the only way for you to draw. Because sometimes, you play the game, but it didn't turn out the way you wanted to initially, and you just find yourself in a position like this one right now on the screen here. So you've got already a little bit of an issue here, because if you tolerate those two pawns, they're going to be pushing down, 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 supported by knight and pawn, and, they might just get a queen. So you better make sure that those pawns disappear. So we're going to see a few scenarios dedicated exactly to this thing. Now, what do you think is the way to removing those two pawns, even if that means your white bishop will disappear? Because, guys, if those two black pawns disappear, black with king and knight can't win the game. Therefore, it's a draw. And probably you guys, you might have just found a solution. You just do this, you sacrifice your bishop, obviously. And in the minute they take back, you're going to be able to be attacking both knight and pawn simultaneously. Thus, draw guaranteed. Even if the king tries to move closer to protecting the knight, no one really cares because you're going to take the pawn. Very cool. Let's do another scenario, guys, until you actually get the hang of it. Okay, what do you think might we do here to making sure that that black pawn on d5 disappears? Well, if you attack him now, let's just say if you attack like king e6, do you know what's going to happen? They're going to be moving the pawn down, okay? And that pawn will be supported by the bishop. Actually, that's a way to lose, because that the king has all the time in the universe to grabbing your guy due to tempo, maneuvering, and you're going to lose. So first thing first, fix the pawn as a weakness, okay? Fix it as a weakness, because the bishop goes on dark squares, but that pawn is on a white square. So let's just fix that guy with a move like d4. Now you might say, but hold on. Like Peter Lecker would say, bishop takes my pawn. Yeah, they might take your pawn, but remember, you need to make sure you're getting rid of the pawn. And now you do attack the pawn. They can't actually moving down the board because they're blocked by their own bishop. And now, voila, you remove the pawn. No more queen being promoted. Okay, the next scenario, guys. I like this one. So, what is key here for white to be winning? Well, it is incredibly important for your opponent to make sure that those two guys, at least one of them, survives in order to being promoted. Because if those two pawns disappear, even if with the cost of your bishop, you at least have a theoretical draw. Rook versus rook and knight. Hey, if you're careful not to getting forked by the white knight, you should be able to draw. Okay, so how do you get rid of those two guys? Well, it's time for you to contemplate a possible sacrifice, which starts not quite right now, but first you gotta give a check which sends the king away from protecting the or getting closer to the g4, that is. So now king has to go, and when they go, now it's time for you to operate the sacrificing piece with bishop takes g4. And now when they take, you actually capture, and this is a draw here, provided you're not getting forked by the knight. Okay, a few more scenarios. I'm absolutely loving it. So now we are playing with the white pieces. We are a little bit toast here. Okay, you need to ensure the two black pawns vanish. They must go away. And fortunately, there is a way. Knight takes, bishop has to capture, and now you just attack the pawn, which can't be defended because the bishop is on light square and the pawn is on a dark square. So you need to, make it a habit. It's good to draw than to lose. It's a truism, right? But hey, you got to be aware of this stuff because it will happen. It'll happen. Not as often as a knight and bishop versus knight and bishop checkmate. It may happen once in your career or maybe never. But this kind of stuff, it will most definitely happen quite often. What do we do here? Well, we need to make sure that we draw here because I'm not. It's not very clear how you're gonna win by getting your guys through this pawn and through the bishop and through the king. So forget about it. But if you're actually making sure that the black pawn is traded, guaranteed you get a draw. Okay. So forget about winning, but draw definitely achievable. Now, there's no point to push the pawn because this kind of wishful thinking may not just work because they just push the pawn down. So, they don't have to take you or they move down and it's everything starts to being uncertain and probably you might even lose. So make sure first thing first, you fix that guy with a move like f2 to f4. And you may wonder, why the hell did I just do that? Well, you've got 2 pawns, right? So now you've got the guy on e3, which will go forward and force your opponent to either take, and if they don't take, you're going to take. So it's been solved. A very nice, good move here. Now you're taking again. That's an absolute draw. Unless they blunder or there's something weird happens and you're going to win. But I seriously doubt it. Because this guy is going to be stopping your pawn here. You're not going to make any sort of progress here. So let's have a look at this position. If you guys remember, rook and king versus rook and king and knight is a theoretical draw. As long as you are slightly, careful not getting forked. But you need to make sure in this position that the black pawn does not exist anymore. And luckily, you do have something to play here. I'm not sure if you guys noticed or not, but you're just going to move this pawn here, which, by the way, attacks the knight and attacks the pawn. Okay, and when they take, you just take. That's it. Draw is guaranteed. Theoretical draw. What do we do here? You need to make sure this guy disappears, but the pawn is defended by the knight. And now, you've got to hold your horses. You might be tempted to say, oh, you know something? I'm going to attack your knight, and you have to go, and I'll take your pawn. Again, it's wishful thinking. It's hopeful chess. That's not going to help. You can't project that your opponent is going to play what you are expecting them to play. But therefore, make a more solid plan. You know what happens if you play king g4? That's exactly how you lose here. You know why? Because the white king is going to play b6, going towards your guy and take it. You can't touch the white knight. Impossible. Well, you could technically, but once you touch the white knight, the pawn is going down. Can you catch up with that guy? Nope, you cannot. Queen is coming. You've lost. So rather than going for this, which guarantees you lose, why don't you find another resource to continue here, my friends? Why don't you look at the d5? And if you tell me, so what's the point? That this guy's going to go towards my pawn, and nevertheless, there is a knight here. Yeah, but the knight will have to choose. They either take your pawn, either onto d4 or d2. And if not, you're going to get a queen. And when they touch your guy, then you're able to just collect the other white pawn. Nice little plan here. It works. If it works, if you don't lose, and if you draw in this kind of not very, optimistic position for black to be dreaming of winning, of course, a draw is always a choice here and definitely preferable. We don't want to lose. Okay. Well, let's have a look at this position. Can we find a way to getting rid of these 2 guys? Because I'm sure you guys remember rook and king versus rook and king and knight is a theoretical draw. That's another nice quotation you should be putting on your t-shirts. Rook and knight, it's theoretical draw. Nice one. So don't be afraid to sacrifice the bishop on g7 if that guarantees you're going to draw. Okay, and luckily you probably have seen it. Bishop g7 to bishop f8, checking the king, eyeing this guy here. Boom, you're going to take that pawn. They're going to take your guy, and there's no point for them not to take. So anyway, and then you're going to take that pawn, and that's it. Just be careful, just be careful not to have the opposition, and if this guy makes it somehow on the back, right? So you got to, if you are aware of these tricks, you should be able to avoid any problems, and practically you should just shake hands and go home, go to a pub, or convene upon a draw here. Live to fight another day. So guys, that was the trading of the pawns in the endgame, exchanging the pawns in the endgame, particularly sacrificing a piece if this is the only way for you to draw. Obviously, we don't want to lose, folks. Follow me on my live streams. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, people. And let's meet up again and again and again and enjoy the remainder of our journey in our chess fantasies. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon.